Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Israel announces temporary evacuation route for Gaza City residents via Salah al-Din Street, which will be open for 48 hours amid intense ground offensive. Meanwhile, Israeli military announces humanitarian aid will enter the northern of Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirms airstrikes on Yemen's Hodeidah port targeting Houthi forces. In retaliation, Yemeni armed forces report launching hypersonic missiles and drones at Israeli sites, escalating the intense conflict between the two sides. US President Donald Trump arrives in the UK for a historic state visit, where he confirms discussions on refining the US-UK trade deal. Speaking to reporters, the US President highlights the success of current trade agreements and emphasises his commitment to improving economic relations. The suspect in the murder of Charlie Kirk appears in court by video from jail as prosecutors seek the death penalty. Authorities revealed the suspect confessed in a hidden note, claiming he had enough of Kirk's alleged, quote, hatred. According to officials, an overnight Russian drone attack in Ukraine's Kirovohrad region partially cut power to the regional centre and 44 settlements, disrupting railway services. Emergency teams fought fires at 3 sites with no casualties reported as recovery efforts are underway. Russian President Vladimir Putin oversees Belarus-Russia military drills with 100,000 troops as India and Iran join the exercises. The manoeuvres feature nuclear-capable bombers and heavy artillery, and they highlight growing defence ties and strategic cooperation among the nations. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen announces plans to accelerate and phase out of Russian fossil fuel imports after a call with President Trump. The European Commission is set to unveil its 19th sanctions package targeting crypto, banks and energy as part of intensified efforts against Russia's war economy. Iran executes Babak Shabazi, accused of spying for Israel's Mossad, state media has reported. Tehran has sharply increased such executions this year, with at least 9 carried out in recent months, amid its shadow war with Israel. Now we start this hour in West Asia, where as the Israeli offensive intensifies, the humanitarian situation in Gaza worsens. Now, according to Gaza's hospitals, Israeli airstrikes overnight killed at least 16 people in Gaza, including women and children. The strikes targeted various parts of the Gaza Strip, including Gaza City and refugee camps. The Israeli military also reported more than 350,000 Palestinians have fled south from Gaza City due to escalating violence. The United Nations estimated at the end of August that around 1 million people lived in Gaza City and its surrounding areas. Since yesterday, Israel has struck over 150 targets in Gaza City as part of its ongoing military operation. Amid the rising death toll and destruction, aid groups are urging the international community to take stronger measures to stop Israel's offensive. The message was signed by leaders of more than 20 aid organizations operating in Gaza, including the Norwegian Refugee Council, Anire and Save the Children. We're now joined by Ali Mohammed Bushbak. He's an independent Palestinian researcher and he joins us live from Cairo in Egypt. Thank you very much, Ali, for joining us on this situation. Ali, of course, this offensive continues by the IDF as the days roll on. How would you describe the situation in Gaza City right now? The IDF has said 350,000 people have evacuated. Israel has also opened a 48-hour evacuation street, as they've called it. Your thoughts on the situation on the ground and how it is affecting those residents of Gaza's most populated urban hub?
Thank you, Thomas, for having me. The situation on the ground, it's a really terrible. Night after night. Gaza City is trampling from the Israeli airstrike, and the intensive bombardment obligated the civilians from Gaza City to flee. And by the way, Gaza City, it's considered one of the biggest and central urban in the Gaza Strip. And more than 1.5 million, they are resident in this area and settled down in this area. So 500,000 nowadays, according to the Israeli report and Israeli estimates, more than 300,000 civilians flee from Gaza City toward North Gaza. Gaza City, according to the Israeli dividing, it's considered as a north part of Gaza, and now the civilians flee to the south part of Gaza. So despite that, also news media, local media reported there is no internet in this area and there is no water service, as well as the lack of medicine and the treatment for the people who got injured, making a challenge for the hospital in Gaza. Yesterday at night, Israel also targeted a children's hospital, Al-Rantisi Hospital in Gaza City, in Al-Nasser neighborhood. Among this also, simultaneously, Israel targeting a Shati refugee camp and the several areas, especially a Sheikh Radwan neighborhood. The intensive bombardment in that area. Israel used airstrike. Israel used also artillery shield, and nowadays naval boat. It's also involved in this operation. Also, there is on the ground. Also, the tank is still invaded several of area in Gaza City. Now that Israel seized a north part of Sheikh Radwan neighborhood, also in west part of Gaza City near the beach, the Mediterranean beach. Israel also seized some areas. Too much situation for the civilians who flee from Gaza, and we have seen several of footage how Israel deliberately targeting civilians and any movable person or any movable things. Israel targeting it. We have seen several of footage that the civilians being deliberately targeted by the Israeli drone or Israeli quadcopter drone as well. So on the ground, there is no internet and there is a lack in information about the situation. Al-Shifa Hospital, they are announced that there is a lack of treatment to treat the civilians and the injured people. Among the Israeli airstrike in a Shati refugee camp, it was a woman and her children and her child as well. They are dead and they are killed. So, by the way, for the people who got flee from Gaza City to north part of Gaza, it's the distance around 18 kilometers. So, to manage this for transportation and to take a truck from Gaza City to south part of Gaza, it will cost you $1,000. 1,000 USD. I confirm about it. Several of civilians frustrated of this because of the lack of fuel and the oil on the ground. Israel doesn't allow for distributing the fuel and the oil for the civilians. So only sources of fuel, it's the hospitals and defense, the civilians' defense. So the things is make it more incredible, and it's according to several of organization, human rights organization.
Okay.
It's
Ali, do stay with us. I'm so sorry to interrupt. We do have a limited amount of time. We have some international responses coming in where Beijing has expressed strong opposition to Israel's escalation of military operations in Gaza following the launch of a major ground assault aimed at dismantling Hamas. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Juan condemned Israel's bombardment of Gaza City, stating the following.
中方坚决反对以色列升级在加沙的军事行动，谴责一切伤害平民、 违反国际法的行为，对局势的进一步紧张升级深感担忧，反对有关方面拱火浇油。我们敦促以色列正视国际社会的强烈呼声，立即停止在加沙的军事行动，尽快实现全面持久停火，防止更大规模的人道主义危机。
Meanwhile, Qatar's foreign ministry and Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned Israel's actions, calling it an extension of the war of genocide and a flagrant violation of international law. The statement, posted on X, accused Israel of undermining peace prospects in the region through systemic violence and racist policies, further jeopardizing both regional and global security. Qatar called for decisive international solidarity to hold Israel accountable, urging compliance with international resolutions to halt the ongoing violence in Gaza. We are once again joined by Ali Mohammed Abushbak to discuss this further. Ali, we hear strong words from these states, especially Qatar and other Arab states. However, little action. What concrete steps you think Arab and international governments should take now beyond condemnations?
Thomas, by the way, but also the international human rights describe the situation in Gaza as an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. Also, according to United Nations, they are accusing that Israel guilty of the committed a genocide. This is the first time that used, despite the Francesca Albanese, the rapporteur of human rights in the Palestinian territories, used this term. So nowadays, Beijing also described the situation, and they are urging Israel to stop the war in Gaza City, especially as a major urban in the Gaza Strip. So the thing is, maybe will make a change because Israel afraid of the relation with Beijing as one of the strongest economic power in the world. So I guess nowadays also the European Union is going to impose a sanction on Israel around the 34% of the Israeli trade between the European Union and Israel. It will be now damaged and impacted by this sanction. One of them, Belgium, also confirmed it's supporting this sanction and without any thinking about or consideration about it. So I guess now that Israel is also, by the way, Thomas, today there is a protest in Israel. The families, the captives' families, they are protesting near the Israelis minister. So that's a several of a pressure. Maybe it will make a change, but according to several of the Israeli ministry of, the militant general and commander, they consider the invading Gaza as a zero-sum game, and they are keeping the hostages as and the captive in the danger of killing or of injured, like we have seen last year during the Israeli invaded Al-Shijaiya neighborhood. 3 of Israelis captive have been killed by Israeli fire.
Ali, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. Here on NewsX World, we will, of course, continue to keep you updated on the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. We move over to Europe next, where Germany, Britain and France are set to hold talks with Iran's foreign minister over Tehran's nuclear programme. A French diplomatic source just confirmed the meeting, which comes amid growing tensions over Iran's nuclear activities. Late last month, the 3 European powers triggered a 30-day deadline for United Nations sanctions to be reimposed if no new agreement is reached with Tehran. Following the deadline's announcement, Kaja Kallas, EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, said that the coming weeks would present a critical window to find a diplomatic solution, stressing that this period must be used to avoid escalation. Meanwhile, the European powers stressed that triggering the 30-day sanctions deadline does not signal the end of diplomacy, but rather highlights the urgency of halting Iran's nuclear advancement. We are now joined by Mark Sutherland. He is a geopolitical commentator and he joins us live from London. Mark, thank you very much for joining us and discussing this issue on the programme with us. Mark, this must set off some alarm bells in Tehran. Of course, Iran's nuclear programme has been the subject of a conflict, of course, this year, earlier on, just a couple of months ago. And now we see European powers triggering that snapback clause that does expire. However, what kind of pressure does this put on an already tense Tehran under the current circumstances?
Thomas, good to be with you again. This must put pressure on. Remember, as you just quite rightly mentioned, that there was a 12-day war where it ended up with the bombing of the nuclear assets there by America, but 12 days war where Israel cleared the way for that. These negotiations, you could say, in dealing with Iran, in the fact that from the regime from 1979 and then moving towards the fact that they were then wanting to have nuclear proliferation, they wanted a bomb. We also have to remember that they have been, they have the ring of fire in regard to Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah. We have to remember all of this. And as President Trump quite rightly said, I cannot have Iran with a nuclear bomb. When you are negotiating with the Iranians, from my own understanding, by reading, listening to people, there is constantly, they will say one thing, but then do another, because they wish to, within their ideology, come up with, to create a nuclear bomb, to then, their words, to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, wipe every Jewish person off the face of the earth. If people don't believe me, then they need to check out their ideology and go down history. The other thing is, just quickly, Thomas, is that when European people go over there to negotiate, again, it's how they're constantly played. This is the issue. This is what the Israelis have warned constantly, that we do not understand the Middle East and how it then functions, Thomas.
Yes, Mark, thank you very much. Do stay with us. We have further updates from Europe, where European Parliament President Roberto Metsola has arrived in Kiev to meet President Volodymyr Zelensky, Prime Minister Yulia Serdenko and Parliament Speaker Ruslan Serdanovchuk. Metsola making her fourth visit to Ukraine since the full-scale war began in 2022, discussed Ukraine's EU accession efforts, Western support and sanctions against Russia. She called her visit a strong message of European solidarity, 1,300 days after the start of the conflict. The trip comes after the European Parliament passed a now binding resolution urging a peaceful end to the war and recommending the launch of EU accession talks, currently blocked by Hungary, considered the most Kremlin-friendly member of the state. The European Commission is also expected to unveil its 19th package of sanctions targeting Russia's crypto assets, banks and energy sector. We are once again joined by Mark Sutherland to discuss these updates coming out of Kiev. Mark, Roberta Metsola has called her trip to Kiev a strong message of European solidarity. This course, of course, comes 1,300 days after the war started. How much weight do these visits carry for Ukrainians on the ground these days, especially from European leaders?
You and I have discussed over the last few months this dreadful war starting February 2022 after the invasion. The losses on the Russian side, the losses on the Ukrainian side, the actual taking of nearly 20% of the Ukrainian land and the devastation then caused. This is humanitarian. This is, we need it to stop. And as you rightly say, there's 1,300 days. This is her fourth visit. They are looking in regard to ascension, e.g. how Europe giving even more support to the Ukraine, which, with what I'm reading, they are certainly holding the line. And as you and I have discussed, this whole thing of giving military aid to them, the bottom line is it's constant words. We need, and there are those articles about that. We need these people to come to the table for a lasting peace, to drill down, to sort this out. Now, the other thing that I could be accused of being very, very cynical is that, of course, sadly, war makes money for people, and that's why I say we want this to end. Now, President Trump has called for even more sanctions, which the Europeans, as you just said, put another the 19th round in. They want more sanctions in regard to energy and how Russia then sells that oil to then finance its war machine. And it's looking at nearly 50% of its economy to actually do that. More and more, if those are applied, because they are not in a good position, and that helps to then drag them, we hope, we pray, to the negotiating table. Thomas.
Mark, let's quickly talk about the issue of fatigue here. This war is entering its 4th year, and we have had 2 players out of the 4 that have been vocal in said fatigue, those being the United States as being mediator just months in, Donald Trump even debating whether he wants the United States to mediate in this conflict anymore, and of course Ukrainians who do not want this war to go on any longer. Europeans, however, with the exception of Hungary, have remained strong and said and stood by Ukraine. And what is your analysis of the 2 players that have said that they are not fatigued in standing by this war, and those being Russia and Europe?
We have to remember where Hungary is geopolitically, where it is geographically, and its previous relationships and relationships that it has had. This is very important. The geopolitically, as you've said, in regard to relationships, America has really turned around and said we need this sorted out, because this happened under the Biden administration. The Americans would still look at, well, you raise the money, you can buy weapons off us, but we want this to end, as so do the Europeans. And as I've said, Thomas, without sounding too cynical, the other thing is that all the European economies are not in a very, very good position whatsoever. And unfortunately, wars make money. We need both sides to come to negotiating table. You and I discussed when there was recently the last negotiations in Turkey that lasted 45 minutes just to exchange prisoners. Now, we need them to come to the table. Russia, the one way to do that, as it's been done, another 19th round, is through economic sanctions, is damaging it in regard to the oil and gas that it then will sell. And look at the relationships, and some of those relationships with other countries, particularly like China, maybe not as strong as some people say. There are people that are circling the sort of Russian empire on the edges, so to speak. The bottom line is we need these sides to come together. We need to stop this. Then it's going to be about what land goes back, what land doesn't go back. And when people like President Zelensky understandably say, well, any ground that's been taken, and come to the table, negotiate and stop this, please. Sorry, Thomas.
That's all right. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time. We now move over to the Indo-Pacific, where a Wells Fargo banker, Chen-Yu Mao, who had been barred from leaving China for several months, has been allowed to return to the United States after the negotiations between the United States and China. The removal of Mao's exit ban after US and China struck a deal in Madrid to switch short video app TikTok to US-controlled ownership, a breakthrough in months-long talks between the 2 biggest economies to defuse a wide-ranging trade war, has unnerved global markets. China's foreign ministry said that she has been prevented from leaving China due to her involvement in a criminal case, and that she had been required to cooperate with an investigation. The ministry also said that China is a country governed by the rule of law and handles criminal cases and issues of exit and entry according to its laws. We're now joined by Andrew K.P. Leung, who's a China strategist, and he joins us live from Hong Kong. What can you tell us more about this case, Andrew? Of course, a major breakthrough yesterday. Some would say an unexpected breakthrough with the TikTok deal being supposedly finalised. But how significant is it that this Wells Fargo banker, like Chen Yu Mao, was barred from leaving China for months? And how does it show that Beijing using these exit bans as leverage in these trade talks?
This is a move by the Chinese side to send some positive signals in the recalibration of relationship between these two countries. And of course, China and of course the United States itself, the Trump administration, always want to rely on their national laws. I mean, national security was being used to gobble up TikTok. And then, of course, national security is also used in the United States to expatriate 1 million illegal immigrants. But anyway, this is a positive signal sent by Beijing to the other side. But as far as the TikTok deal is concerned, let's not go overboard that the entire TikTok operation worldwide, because it's not just the United States, it's about other countries as well as the intellectual property owned by the Beijing, by China's big company called Big Dance, which owns the TikTok operation worldwide, as well as the Chinese version on the mainland China. It's going to give up everything. But nevertheless, some breakthroughs have been achieved pending further negotiations. And I think that the release of this person is seen as a positive signal sent by Beijing to the other side.
Yes, Andrew K.P. Leung, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed in that issue. For our next story, we move over to South America, where former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has been taken to the hospital after feeling unwell. His eldest son and Senator Flavio Bolsonaro revealed that the former president was experiencing a severe bout of hiccups, vomiting and low blood pressure. Former First Lady Michelle Bolsonaro also announced that the ex-president underwent several tests and is currently receiving intravenous medication. The incident comes just a week after Bolsonaro was convicted of plotting a coup following his narrow defeat in the 2022 elections. The 70-year-old leader has been sentenced to over 27 years in prison. Bolsonaro has previously been hospitalized due to pain from a wound sustained when he was stabbed during his election campaign 7 years ago. Since August, Bolsonaro has been under house arrest after allegedly violating court-imposed restrictions. His son and Senator Flavio has requested supporters to pray for the leader. Let's listen in to what his son had to say.
Com vômito forte, com tontura, uma pressão muito baixa. E aí, graças a Deus, a Michelle estava lá perto dele e conseguiu rapidamente trazer ele para cá. Ele está lá estável, mas não está com a cara boa, bastante desidratado.
De manhã, e ele já tinha passado mal nessa manhã e teve complicações agora à tarde, e que já deu entrada com esse quadro de soluço, vômito, volta com a anemia e a fraqueza.
Well, this is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.